This is the New Ages Now. I do this a couple of times a week, maybe, at this time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And just having a discussion on the New Ages and whatever we have in our focus for the day. So, part of what's going on is that we are experiencing technical difficulties, which is that actually the media mafia, monopoly, money, madness, magicians, and so we're experiencing our personal technical difficulties as we're trying to demonstrate the New Ages and what is going on here in the continuous Old Ages processing and the simulator of human experience in the lower realms, and this it's all linked together, even though we are not really fully aware of it. It's such a unique and dynamic time. So today is 2/21/2022. Interesting. One day before 2/22/2022. So what's going on in the world? And there's you talk about the politics or the wars or the sycophant monopoly, money, economic, unnatural conditioning, processing, monetarization of people through the internet, which this is also being, and we are quite aware of it, or at least a few of us are, noticing how they are using our positions in the internet, our website connections, our telephone operation, and making sure that we are paying attention to everything that they are producing and developing or demonstrating and also destroying all at the same time. And we are identifying this in the most peculiar way because it's relevant in the very large picture. There's some kind of a processing humanity, whether it is to become android robotic, sycophant or sympathizers, or it is to become free, independent humanity, not the old humanitized production of millenniums ago that is reached up to this point. So, I'm going to mention a book. It's called The Fourth Turning, and it says that every 79 or 80 years, there's a cyclic pattern repeating, and we reach certain points about every 20 years in this, 4 different points total, getting up to 80 years, and we'll date that back in the United States because the book is about the realizations in the United States back to 1770s, and then the 1860s, 1860, I guess, in particular, 1859, crisis time. and then continuing to that is 1939, and then World War II, and then also now 2019, 2022, thereabouts. We're running into the next cycle, and we're completing this one, and so crisis time is apparent, and I think it's going to be increased somewhat by solar flare issues this year. Last month in particular, there was a tremendous amount of solar flares of high number, and although there's this talk of the danger of the 5D, or remember the exact 5G even could be related to the network, electronic, Verizons, etc. But really, what it is has been the solar flares. The sun every 11 years also has its solar flare-up peak, and that's supposedly, or maybe naturally, is here now, or has been recently. We had a 5G flare-up, very strong one, I think, in January 2022. So these are issues of relevance. We're trying to break through the communication barriers, the media control domination, to be able to actually revolutionize, or in a sense, get beyond the AI technology revolution, or what it is, more like a respecting of domination and control, and at the same time, concurrent with this movement, generationally, or maybe more in reliance with that 80-year cycle of revolution, or slash war, that seems to occur, at least in the United States, relevantly. Of course, I think that's partially because America, the United States, is the root race, currently still with the position of perhaps bringing about the new revolution or new reality. I call it a revolution. America could be of all continents, all nations, all peoples, all races, all individualities, sexes, and what have you. Acceptance, that is what they call the Aquarian New Age.
Jesus, I stupid.
I love this audience we have with Fred. It's kind of humorous. Maybe this is all a bunch of caca, and you need to clean the teeth and the eyes, and Visine in the eyes, and clean up your beards, and comb your hair, and do all of those things that we need to as individual, personal. And at the same time, hey, this is something that's completely beyond all that personal issues, interests, and self-convinced ideas, and the old concepts, religions, and governments, and business, and politics, and social communion identities, and all the rest of that that we've learned or been taught in the Disney-esque situation, Fantasy Island. Thinking of some movies now, like Lord of the Rings or Day of the Triffids, which is an interesting one that had the plants were hybridized into attack. They actually could move, and there was a meteor of some kind or light from the sky that blinded all the people who were watching it, and then they also the plants were facilitated to act as destroyers, and they're attacking the people. It's an English movie and made in the 60s, and very much related to what actually happened in that period of time. With the, let's say, with the hippies and the so-called New Age consciousness, there was a definite spike in the awareness. It's a control from the fourth dimension, and they opened the astral doorway. We did, and we got sex, drugs, and rock and roll, learned of peace and happiness, or some kind of a natural respect for the environment, at the same time that there was a definite social production, a movement, communion created that was called Woodstock, but it was actually a definitive exasperation of humanity. And if you notice that most of the rock stars and musicians, the famous ones, all were died or were killed or ended their lives even before their times, unnaturally. It's not the consciousness that's been taught. It's not the relevance that's been heard. And it's usually over the heads or under the table, and cannot be particularly understood. It might be misread or not even heard well. And there's very few who even have a willingness to listen. But there is also a growing and large movement now, about 60 years later, at another one of the 20-year points in that fourth turning, actually the last one, supposedly around 2020, plus, we can say that's, there it is. This is either a bad hair day or the camera doesn't look good that way. But I'm going to take a little dive in the ocean of self-care. That looks a little better. Okay. So, masters of the universe. That's something that we're dealing with. And who are they, and what are they, and why are they acting so lordly over humanity instead of allowing us or the whole to actually have a sense of freedom and unity at the same time, but not social necessarily, not cultural, political, by nationalities or any of those individual perspectives. So, we're all experiencing this simulation like a game being played, which is coordinated at all the different levels, and our apparent hypnographic viewpoint is like the holographic projection that, or you could say, is something like the picture behind me. I don't know where that picture is sent up here, but I didn't choose it that I know of, my background, and yet there it is, some kind of a Buddha sitting in a temple with their chains of uh, belts, belt of consciousness, if you will, and it's apparent in that sense. It's a reflection, and almost like the Buddha's locked in the temple. Um, it looks like, yes, he's not able to be free, but he's the Buddha idea, contemplation, meditation, letting oneself be in that total union is certainly an aspect, but of the free being. At the same time, it appears like it's in this locked box chamber, or this temple idea of uh, the body as a temple, or the world as, or our space that we created, that is. And it's really a simulated projection each one of us makes of our own without the full knowledge of the actuality. So we have to comprehend or apprehend this view, that is, by the new you will open that door and connect directly every time it's used, and we can follow our dream vision as apparently we might or will. So, it'll be something like putting on our real glasses and saying, now I can see what the picture is. Sort of. It's not lost in the forest or the woods, even though it may appear so, not caught in the temple or the locked box or the sanctuary. I am with it and without, as we all are, actually. And this is the recognition, using our real awareness, that we may actually sense beyond the creation senses, the physical, their emotions and mind, uh, psychic, or other awareness vehicles. That's all they are. They're not the actual awareness itself, or the true recognitions, any more than the temple or the sanctuary or the forest is anything other than what it is itself, of itself. And of course, it cannot circumvent the true reality life is, that we're becoming aware of. Okay. I'm reminded of another movie here. It's called The Lathe of Heaven. It's about a dreamer who dreams that he's every dream he has at night becomes reality in the daytime. And he goes to a scientist for help, or a psychologist who wants to have the man control his dreams, so that he can help the world in the vision that the psychologist has of what would be best for the world, which turns into terror and tribulation. And so it's very, very curious that we could say how interesting. It's a story book by Ursula K, and this has become She's an excellent writer, and has a number of other books as well. Left Hand of Darkness is one, and there's a third one, not quite coming up with that title. And so what's interesting is the actor, Bruce Davison, in The Lathe of Heaven, which was, by the way, made in the 80s. It's a PBS special, very small kind of movie, we'll say, low budget, but it was an opening for myself at the time. And in any case, Bruce Davison, recently I saw him acting in a role in the Ozarks series, which is about husband and wife and family who become hooked up with the mafia and casino gambling and drug production. And in order to survive, they have to keep going into these different areas and for their own protection, and they have to keep advancing through. And they're also becoming politicians and taking over control of the state, which is Missouri. It's an interesting context that, when you're caught in the simulator or the coordination of the social economics, you find yourself perhaps going down certain pathways that you wouldn't ever think of wanting to do otherwise. And basically, like a ball rolling down the hill, you just keep following the bouncing ball. So Davison is playing a governor who is manipulating this environment and the economics, and also needing to protect himself, which at some point it indicates that probably having some people outed physically and otherwise from their positions, or outed being killed. And same thing happened with the couple who had come from Chicago to Missouri. It's an interesting series, and I think there's a lot of people watching it. Nonetheless, the Davison character that he's playing in this latest issue is completely on the other side of the one that was in the Dream movie, Lathe of Heaven, which is much more of a good guy, just wanting to find out what's going on with him. And he gets partially manipulated until that is into creating a universe that turns into a kind of a megalomania monster appears that he created in the dream. And this monster is a controlling influence as well as a demonic kind of disaster producer. And wow, so makes you think. Same thing I noticed a couple of days recently, where Kevin Costner, who was one of my favorites in the movie Field of Dreams, played a wonderful character who follows the voice that tells him to go the distance and ease his pain. And there's three of them. Build it and they will come, of course, the main one. And this with James Earl Jones and the baseball star Joe Jackson, and actually his Kevin Costner's father, that is his father in the movie, who he finally gets to play ball with. In this baseball story, where the players from heaven, like Joe Jackson, the Chicago, the Blanketed Nine, are brought to bear. In other words, they come through the cornfield and to play baseball because they can't play in heaven, and they really want to come back here just to be able to play. And it's just a great movie. But Costner, who plays the lead character, Ray Kinsella, is brought up front, and he, in current time, he's playing in this miniseries called Yellowstone. It's curiosity because we're also watching a series that's called 1883, which is actually the precursor to the Yellowstone story. In other words, the movies are connected. The 1883 with Elliot, Sam Elliott, is a character who is leading these foreigners, immigrant settlers, and the cattle and the wagon train through Texas and into Colorado. Well, if they ever get there, and he's their guide, and most of the people don't speak English, and so it's curious that this character is related to the Kevin Costner, who is playing the head of the ranch in Yellowstone, who basically at any cost will defend his right to do what he wants on his land that he thinks he owns, even though, yes, maybe he owns it in the social sense, but the Indians don't agree, I don't think. And at the same time, even if he does, he's, the iron hand, so to speak, or just the defender of the faith, of personal property and ownership of the country or the land, and like American is based on, we'll say, this is actually true. We have taken over all of the lands that were primarily and essentially owned by the natives, the tribes and the Indians. So with that in mind, the same attitude, which is somewhat brutal and manifestly controlling and dominating, is at the issue of what's going on right now everywhere. And we're looking at that in these different simulated movie positions, not knowing for sure, well, what kind of freedom do we really want? And what is the true reality life is? This is why we're presenting in this way, sharing about these either through a reel-to-reel movie show or the New Aegis Now and the New UU Worldwide Educators. Practice in general in an open way, no agendas, no politics, no science, no religions, no governments, no institutionalities, no principles of law or any of the other creations, forthrightly perhaps, but we also have to digress and revert to these old references and the old films and movies and ideas and books and et ceteras, because This is the entire procedure of a new man experience. So, okay, covered a lot of territory. Just relate this in general to the populace, not to anyone personal, that this is pretty much the entire presentation of New You at this time, and its under effect and connection is very minimal, and it's very hard to get the direct connection to the large populace. So this is a reflection perfectly shared, and I'm very happy to have actually been able to do it. So I am going to end or conclude with some music. Can you hear the ages in? Here's the singing. What is within know? What is it on? Can you hear me? Is there sound and light? Can you hear me? Your eyes shine like the sun. Shine like the sun. Can you hear me? I know you're listening. Can you see me? You shining, singing. Thank you all.